Sorry, this is weird positioning or whatever, but yeah, why not? Let's do this. So, I promised you a very interesting movie face-off last time I did a face-off video, and oh boy, do I have one for you. Now, since it's still in theaters, I should let you guys know that there are going to be some light spoilers in this video for Spider-Man Far From Home. Not a whole lot. I won't get into like the really big stuff, but just so you know, there are going to be some spoilers in this video. So if you have not seen Spider-Man Far From Home, go watch it. Come back, watch this video. With that being said, let's get right into it. Back in the 2000s, we've had the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. Sorry, weird burp. Then in the early 2010s, we had the two Andrew Garfield / Mark Webb was the director Spider-Man films. And now we have the Tom Holland / John Watts / MCU Spider-Man films. Yeah, more than one now. We did it, guys. Anyway, so in 2017, we got Spider-Man Homecoming, which marked the second appearance of Spider-Man in the MCU, his first one being Captain America Civil War. And now we have, well, Spider-Man Far From Home, the epilogue chapter to the Infinity War saga. So, we've got 5 rounds of this. Let's get right into it. Round 1, supporting characters. In Homecoming, we have best friend Ned, who learns that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and does his best to help in any way he can. You've got MJ. Her first name is Michelle, guys, not Mary Jane. Calm the fuck down. MJ, who in Homecoming is just more of another like sarcastic, dark humor friend. And we have Aunt May. We've got Tony Stark for a couple of appearances. And that's... Oh, and we also have Happy Hogan. He plays a small role in Homecoming as well. And that's more or less the main focus of the supporting cast for Homecoming. In Far From Home, we again got Ned. We've got MJ, who plays more of a love interest in this film. Aunt May for a little bit. Happy Hogan for a more larger role. Couple other... we got Nick Fury and Maria Hill too. And that's the supporting cast for Far From Home. So the addition of Nick Fury and Maria Hill is pretty nice to have in Far From Home. And the increasing role that Happy Hogan had in Far From Home compared to Homecoming is actually really nice and fits well with the themes of that movie. Although, when it comes to the other supporting characters, they feel slightly more simplified in Far From Home from a certain perspective, or at least we don't get as much time with them as we did in Homecoming. In Homecoming, we got to know these characters a little bit more. Sure, Happy may not have had as big a story in Homecoming as did in Far From Home, but he was still there. He still had a couple nice moments. And honestly, I think they did Ned better in Homecoming, and I like Ned. I don't know what the general consensus is about Ned, but I like him, so give this one to Homecoming. Now let's move on to round 2, which will be action. So we've got some nice, fun action going in Homecoming. Maybe not anything too groundbreaking. The Washington Monument, a little bit familiar to a couple past Spider-Man films. But we got some nice, engaging, fun action to watch, especially with going up against the Vulture. But we'll get to him in a different round. And we've got some of the nice, great action Far From Home too. But there is one thing that sort of sets apart the action scenes from Far From Home and Homecoming. In Far From Home, we have the character Mysterio. Again, we'll get more to him in a different round. But there is this one illusion scene that happens the end of the second act, beginning of the third act, where he does really go all in with his illusions and psychologically attacking Peter, and it's awesome. It's like really trippy, beautiful, scary, intimidating imagery. And it has some nice thematic themes into the rest of the movie too. It's not just illusions just for scary illusions' sake. They actually have more deeper emotional meaning, and that's why it scares Peter so much. I think it's because of that the action has a little bit more of an emotional attachment to the rest of the film. So this round goes to Far From Home. Now let's move on to round 3, comedy. Now, every MCU has a pretty large element of comedy in it, although it goes from varying degrees. For Ragnarok, it's basically a giant comedy. While other films such as Black Panther, while there is a little bit of a comedic element, it is mostly focused on the drama and the actual character development. With Homecoming and Far From Home, it's like the quirky high school superhero film kind of element to it, where it does play like a sizable part in the film. It's also not really like the main focus. If you kind of get what I mean, a little bit hard to explain. But you do have some of the quirky high school humor, and sometimes that humor can also be awkward, which, if that's the purpose of the joke, actually works. But in other jokes, comes off as a little bit more forced or just doesn't really stick the landing all that well. And there are, and so the comedy in Homecoming is a little bit more, how do I put this? A little more consistent, I guess. Far From Home, it's fairly consistent, but a few other jokes that probably didn't work as well as they could have been. Not to say that there aren't any kinds of those jokes in Homecoming either, but I thought there were more jokes that landed when it was supposed to have compared to Far From Home. So this round goes to Homecoming. Now let's move on to round 4, story. Story of Homecoming is basically Peter Parker trying to, become like his own superhero, his own person, separate from Tony Stark. Because he's been kind of like a big shadow over him, and while he does rely on him for like his technologically advanced suit and everything, he also wants to prove that he can do superhero things. With Far From Home, you just can't really get away from Tony in this film. I mean, he's dead, but his shadow looms large, and people are asking him, are you going to be the next Iron Man? How are you going to step up? And of course, villain Mysterio does kind of throw that in his face a little bit too, which emotionally, gets at Peter at his core a little bit. Now with Homecoming, there were some people that have a criticism that while they were happy, they kind of skipped over the whole origin of Uncle Ben dying. There were some that said by skipping over it, they kind of missed something that's usually a big element of Peter, understanding why he does what he does. I mean, you get a little bit of a sense for it in Homecoming, but that element of figuring out why exactly he's doing what he's doing, what's his motivation, is a little bit more vague and implied rather than actually seen on screen. On the one hand, that can be a good thing because we've seen the origin 2 times in a decade? We kind of can go over it can skip it a little bit, but without actually seeing his real motivation for why he's doing this at all, it does sort of take away a little bit from Peter. In Far From Home, with using Tony Stark as a stand-in Uncle Ben, it actually adds a lot more to his emotional arc in this film. Yes, while it is nice Spider-Man Homecoming is a little bit more self-contained compared to Far From Home, with Far From Home, you actually feel like this movie understands who Peter / Spider-Man is, why he's doing this, what drives him, his motivation. And it's because of that, I'm giving this round to Far From Home. Alright, we've got a 2-2 tie. Let's move on to the 5th and final round, the villain. This may seem like a weird round to end on, and it probably is, but Spider-Man is the equivalent of Batman in the sense that his villains gallery, his rogue gallery, is just as iconic as the hero himself. You've got the Green Goblin, you've got Doc Ock, Venom. There are so many famous villains from the Spider-Man Rogues gallery that, honestly, are just as famous, if not even more famous, than Spider-Man himself. And we've got 2 new villains in this MCU version of Spider-Man that haven't really been seen in past versions of Spider-Man. In Homecoming, it's the Vulture, Adrian Toomes. a working man who lost his job due to Tony Stark and basically ends up selling alien weapons on the black market trying to support for his family. With Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, he was a former direct employee of Tony Stark, the creator of the Barf technology, and once he ended up getting fired, he gathered a bunch of other people that got fired from Tony Stark for various reasons, and they all band together to create a new hero that they can get all the fame and glory and power for themselves, Mysterio. And Mysterio goes after Peter to get something that Tony left for Peter and uses it to accomplish his own agenda. Now, both these villains are very well acted. With with Vulture, it's Michael Keaton, a Batman actor. This guy can be scary even when he's not in the full villain outfit, when he's just talking to Peter in that car, dropping him off at prom with his daughter. That was an intimidating scene, and that had no villain, no comic booky elements, really, just a guy telling him exactly what he wants. And we've got Mysterio, who is played by Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal was at one point considered to replace Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. And he's playing the villain Mysterio, who was at one point going to eventually come into the Sam Raimi version of the Spider-Man films, who would then be played by Bruce Campbell in more of like a cameo role. But the fact that they've got two parts of the Raimi films that almost happened and finally have them see the light of day in this film is truly pretty touching for any hardcore fans of the Sam Raimi films. And his performance is pretty good too. He can be intimidating when he needs to be, a little bit funny when he needs to be. But these two actors, while similar, are fundamentally pretty different actors. You got one that can be like just generally scary pretty easily when Jake Gyllenhaal puts in a lot of hard work in his performances, but doesn't come off probably as easily as some other parts of the film. But again, his performance is still very entertaining. And psychologically speaking, he really gets at Peter. With Vulture, he does intimidate him, but ultimately Peter still does what he does, and he doesn't really hesitate that much about trying to go after him. So which one is the better villain? The one who's naturally scary and intimidating, or the one who may not be quite as scary and intimidating in the same way, but one that actually psychologically gets at Peter at his core, makes him really start to doubt himself? This is a really tough call. I mean, half of a good superhero movie comes from the villain. You know, I'm going to give this one to Mysterio, because he plays a more emotional, relevant role in the themes of Far From Home and what exactly happens in the film, as compared to Vulture, who still plays in, but Mysterio just plays a much more big role, and ultimately, he does leave a long-lasting impact in more ways than one. If you've seen the film, you know what I mean. So the round goes to Far From Home, and Spider-Man Far From Home beats Spider-Man Homecoming as the best live-action Spider-Man film. In terms of the best Spider-Man film in general, it's still Into the Spider-Verse. I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's going to top Into the Spider-Verse. But number 2 isn't so bad, Far From Home. So that's all I really have to say for right now. Like, comment, subscribe, share. I'll see you guys next time.